After 2 months of U.S. military training in Turkey from the Obama administration's Pentagon, the first group of 70 moderate Syrian rebels crossed into Syria this week and promptly handed all of their U.S. weapons and equipment to Al-Qaeda's local affiliate known as Jabhat al-Nusra. Citing a raft of sources, the UK Telegraph reported that Obama's latest batch of moderate rebels, dubbed Division 30, immediately betrayed their U.S. government backers upon re-entering Syria. While the embarrassing situation is being framed in most of the press as an accident or blunder of some sort, it is hardly the first time, and recent calls by senior U.S. globalists to form an alliance with Al-Qaeda in Syria might offer a more plausible explanation. Either way, critics say it has become beyond clear that Obama's supposed strategy in Syria is in reality a recipe for even more death and destruction. Among other sources confirming the transfer of those American weapons from U.S.-backed rebels to Al-Qaeda was the terrorist group itself, which the U.S. government spent trillions of dollars fighting around the world under the guise of its war on terror. A strong slap for America, boasted a spokesman for Jabhat al-Nusra, calling himself Abu Fahd al-Tunaisi in a Twitter message to the world. The new group from Division 30 that entered yesterday hands over all of its weapons to Jabhat al-Nusra after being granted safe passage. They handed over a very large amount of ammunition and medium weaponry and a number of pickups. According to the British paper, Division 30 was the first faction whose fighters graduated from a US-led training program in Turkey which aims to forge a force on the ground in Syria. Another Al-Qaeda source commenting on the reported mass defection, Abu Khattab al-Maqdisi, says publicly that the US-trained commander of Division 30, Anas Ibrahim Abaid, had told Jabhat al-Nusra leaders that he tricked the anti-ISIS coalition because he needed weapons for jihad. He promised to issue a statement repudiating Division 30, the coalition, and those who trained him, al-Maqdisi was quoted as saying on Twitter by the UK newspaper. And he also gave a large amount of weapons to Jabhat al-Nusra. A handful of conflicting news reports have suggested Obama's rebels may have actually been captured and forced into surrendering their US military equipment to Al-Qaeda. However, public statements by the rebels themselves and Al-Qaeda would seem to support the claim that the US-trained force did in fact betray its benefactors in Washington. Indeed, the day before the Telegraph exposed Division 30's handover of weapons to Al-Qaeda, various media outlets were reporting that the Chief of Staff for the US-trained rebel group had publicly resigned, with the letter posted on social media. The undersigned Colonel Mohammed Daha Abu Hassam, Chief of Staff of the 30th Brigade, announced my withdrawal from the 30th Brigade for the following reasons, he wrote. Among other reasons cited, he pointed to the lack of accuracy and methodology in the selection of teams of the 30th Brigade, and the heterogeneity in the ideas of the trainees to achieve the objective on which the 30th Brigade was created. He also said the Obama administration's effort lacked seriousness, and that there was no census numbers of brigade members on the ground. Perhaps the Obama administration was following recent advice provided by disgraced General David Petraeus, the retired Army general and former CIA boss who now spends much of his time shilling for a North American Union. According to various media reports, Petraeus, who once led the supposed terror war against Al-Qaeda, is now advocating an open alliance between the U.S. government and the terrorist group to allegedly battle the Islamic State, itself a product of globalist scheming in the Middle East. The former commander of U.S. forces in Iraq and Afghanistan has been quietly urging U.S. officials to consider using so-called moderate members of Al-Qaeda's Nusra Front to fight ISIS in Syria, reported the left-wing online outlet Daily Beast, citing 4 sources familiar with the conversations, including one person who spoke to Petraeus directly. Yet, despite being so utterly ridiculous as to smack of criminal insanity or even treason, Petraeus and his plan cannot be written off, the Daily Beast continued. He still wields considerable influence with current officials, U.S. lawmakers, and foreign leaders. The fact that he feels comfortable recruiting defectors from an organization that has declared war on the United States underscores the tenuous nature of the Obama administration's strategy to fight ISIS, which numerous observers have said is floundering in search of a viable ground force. Of course, as the New American has been reporting for years, and as numerous top Western officials have openly admitted, the U.S. government was directly involved in creating Al-Qaeda. In Syria and in Libya, the Obama administration also provided direct aid to self-declared Al-Qaeda leaders, some of whom were openly boasting of their terrorist credentials in the Western press, as NATO provided air cover for them under a United Nations resolution. It could all just be part of the globalist plan. A recently uncovered secret U.S. diplomatic cable from then acting Deputy U.S. Chief of Mission in Syria William Roebuck reveals an extremist plan to undermine the Syrian dictatorship. Among other controversial tactics, the decade-old cable shows a U.S. government scheme to exploit various extremist groups and Islamist extremists, as well as intra-Islamic tensions, to destabilize the regime of Bashar al-Assad. In possible actions, the U.S. cable also proposed that Washington, D.C., publicize Syrian efforts against extremist groups in a way that suggests weakness, signs of instability, and uncontrolled blowback. Tragically, the blowback from globalist U.S. policymakers' scheming has now produced fruit: hundreds of thousands of deaths, millions of people displaced, an ongoing genocide of Christians, the emergence of savage terrorism, a tidal wave of refugees flooding into Europe, and much more. When it comes to ISIS, the situation is similar. A recently released 2012 report from the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, for example, revealed that the Obama administration, European governments and their Islamist allies in the war on Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad knew from the start that the rebellion was being led by Al-Qaeda and other forces, yet they supported it anyway. The same document also revealed a plan to create a radical Islamic state in eastern Syria, today known to the world as ISIS. The West, Gulf countries, the Islamic regimes ruling Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, etc., and Turkey support the Syrian opposition, the document explains, adding that Al-Qaeda and other terrorists are the major forces driving the insurgency against the Syrian despot. There is the possibility of establishing a declared or undeclared Salafist, fundamentalist Islam, principality in eastern Syria, Hasaka and Diaza, and this is exactly what the supporting powers to the opposition want, in order to isolate the Syrian regime. Emphasis added. It is also exactly what they got when ISIS declared the establishment of its caliphate. The latest news on Obama's newest rebels defecting to Al-Qaeda with their U.S. weapons follows numerous similar reports of U.S.-backed rebels joining forces with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. It also comes just a week after another news report exposed the fact that a top military commander for the Islamic State was trained by U.S. Special Forces in the nation of Georgia. The same ISIS leader, Tarkan Bertirashvili aka Abu Omar al-Shishani, was radicalized in a mosque funded by the Islamist dictatorship ruling Saudi Arabia, a key member of Obama's anti-ISIS coalition. None of that, though, should be surprising, considering the fact that multiple senior U.S. officials from Vice President Joe Biden to Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Martin Dempsey have already publicly exposed the fact that Obama's anti-ISIS coalition largely built, financed, armed, and trained ISIS. In other words, Obama's alleged strategy to degrade ISIS appears more like a strategy aimed at annihilating Syria, fomenting bloodshed and terrorism, exterminating Christians, and advancing various globalist agendas. By remaining silent on these crimes of apocalyptic proportions, American taxpayers funding it all make themselves indirectly complicit. It is time for Congress to cut off the funds for the White House's deadly scheming, and to launch serious investigations into every element of Obama's lawless machinations in Libya, Syria, Iraq, and beyond. Anything less will make Congress just as complicit as Obama and the globalist establishment in the tragedy now unfolding across the Middle East.